is since I am going to add to the test on Saturday a practical portion. In other words, what I'll do is I will have this guy with his head in the back of the room, and I'll have numbers on the bones. And after you're done with the first part of the test, the written part, then you'll come back to the back of the room, drop off the written part, I'll give you a new sheet, and you'll use that, and you'll fill in all of the numbers of bones. I don't know how many I'll include yet. I don't know if I'll include a word bank, probably not, but I don't know. So you do need to know the bones. You have to have an idea of how to spell them. If you're way off, obviously you don't get credit. There are some that you have to be absolutely correct with. Something like the ilium. The ilium being the flat bone, I call this right here, because that is spelled I-L-I-U-M, but there's also a portion of the small intestines called the ilium, spelled I-L-E-U-M. So if you spell that incorrectly, that would be the wrong body part. For the humerus, the radius, for the ulna. Some people, for some reason, I've seen O-O-L-N-A for ulna. Yes, that's how they heard it, so that's what they think it's spelled. Make sure you know the spellings. Make sure you use the medical term. So in other words, it's not the shoulder blade, right? You have to understand. Does everybody have a background with the skeleton? You've gone over this before. Do you know the bones?
I
The big ones.
Yeah.
The big ones. Femur.
Yep.
Okay. It's a femur, the middle femur. Okay. So most of the stuff's going to be reviewed, I think. I hope so. So I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. The nice thing about learning the bones, of which there are approximately 206, I think Cass decided, approximately 206 bones. The nice thing about learning about the bones is that there's a lot of repetition. There's a humerus on this side, there's one that's just like on that side. So it's really not that difficult to learn all the bones. If you have a phone on your app or an iPad or something, that is very, very helpful for you to mention. If you do not, even if you do, one of the things I always suggest is that you take pictures of this guy, That way, when you're studying at home, you will see the exact skeleton that you're going to be tested on. So rather than seeing an app that might look a little different, remember when skeletons are made like this, they're often cast from a real skeleton, so there's always going to be variation. So what is obvious in a picture might not be as obvious in 3 dimensions. And because this is a 3-dimensional project, I do encourage a little bit of participation. Everyone's familiar with the cranium, at least, right? Okay. I'm going to go through the major bones here. Something like the ethmoid bone, although we'll see it in the text. I'll show you one of the DVDs, the DVD-ROMs, has a nice animation because it explodes the skull and you can see things a little bit better. But I wouldn't actually expect you to know it for an exam, just because it's kind of difficult to see here and pinpoint here. Some of the smaller bones, like the lacrum bones, nasal bones, I will point out. You can see them in your text, but I wouldn't expect you to know those. But the larger ones I will. All right, so be prepared for that. That will be part of the exam. I do only allow 5 people back to a skeleton at a time, for obvious reasons, because there's just not enough room for everybody. So if you finish and there's already 5 people back there, you have to kind of wait until the spot clears. With that being said, they are working on getting another skeleton for Saturday, so we might be able to have 2 groups, which should be that much easier, yes.
Is the written part multiple choice?
I'm sorry?
Is the written part multiple choice? The first part of the test.
The first part
is
is multiple choice, yes. It just comes from the word bank, or from the test bank, very similar. This one you'll actually have to write in the answers. If I can't read it, it's gonna be wrong, so make sure you print it clearly enough. All right. There's good information in this chapter about the skeleton, and I strongly recommend you knowing most of it, but unfortunately, we only have so much time tonight to go through everything, so I'm hoping to be able to get through the stuff, so kind of bear with me as I flip through some of these slides. I also have handouts. This one, I think I forgot 2 pages on it. Okay. This I give out not as a homework assignment, not as something that you would flip through, find the answer for, and then write it in, but instead it would be used for you to sort of practice with. The night before the exam, see how much you know, and write them in. So it's not something I'm ever going to collect from you. It's not something I expect you to do. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. I think it's helpful. People find it helpful. Now, there is one caveat here. If you look at the first, on the front page where the cranium is, you'll notice that almost right in the middle, there's a little tiny bone right here. There's a little tiny bone. Does anyone know what that's called? That little tiny cat. This little tiny bone right here. It's not labeled. Not the temporal bone. It's actually above the temporal bone. It's the little one right here. Sphenoid bone? It's actually above the sphenoid bone as well. It's that little tiny piece. Okay. You're not going to know the name for it because it doesn't have a name. That's what's called a Wormian bone, because where these suture lines come together, they don't always intersect exactly. And the skull that I was drawing from actually had a Wormian bone. And so when I just included it and then later realized, oh, I probably shouldn't have included it, that's just going to confuse people. So that's why that is there. So excuse that.
Did you read this?
Yes, I don't like using copyrighted material. So, well, I just put a bone down, or I get a photograph, and just draw it from that. Now you'll notice also on the front page, the arm, this is where the hand bones are. It's blurred intentionally, because I just wanted to focus on the radius and the ulnar humerus. I do, however, have a continuing education course I have written. Now, this is a short continuing education course. One of those ones you can go online and do, and you get, a couple continuing education credit hours for whatever. And it does have, well, that's not a big copy, but it does have a hand that I drew with all the hand and wrist bones in it, so you can see it a little bit better that way. So your book, I don't think, like I said, I don't think your book has these in it, but I want you to have those so you know them. This also has some good quiz questions at the end that you can do if you like. This is not homework. The thing that it does offer obviously a lot of support and a lot of protection, but it also has other functions. It is a great storage site for things like phosphorus and calcium. Calcium is extremely important for making our muscles do what muscles are supposed to do. Calcium is what causes the contraction to happen. So, if you have a lot of muscle, your body needs to store extra calcium. The more muscle mass a person has, the more the calcium the body is going to store. And a place to store that is in the bones. So it makes the bones nice and hard. If you want to avoid osteoporosis, increase your muscle mass. Don't listen to the people who tell you calcium supplements, because that isn't helpful until maybe you're in your 60s, unless you're specifically deficient in calcium. That is not helpful until you're in your 60s or 70s. If your body doesn't need it, it's not going to absorb it, you're going to pee it right out. Instead, create a need for calcium. The way to create a need for calcium is by building up the muscles. This is why men get osteoporosis a lot less than women do, because men naturally have more muscle mass. So, ladies, I strongly suggest including resistance exercises. You don't have to be a bodybuilder, but extra muscle mass will help with that later on. So it's a great storage site for calcium. There is some fat storage in there, which means it's a good energy source, even though it's pretty selfish with that, but it's a good energy source. It's also a really great place to make blood cells. And I think somewhere in the book it talks about making red blood cells in the case of an emergency, which is true. However, it makes all blood cells, not just red blood cells. There are cell groups, a cell type especially in the ends of the long bones, where we have red bone marrow, not the yellow fatty stuff, but the red bone marrow on the ends. And there we find hematopoietic pluripotential stem cells. Sounds like a lot, but they do a lot. These stem cells make all of the blood cells in our body. They're the ones responsible for making all the blood cells. So one hematopoietic pluripotential stem cell can become a red blood cell, or it can become a white blood cell. It can become any of the white blood cells, or it can become a megakaryocyte, which is the type of cell that is eventually going to break off and become platelets. So it has a lot of